The ship tore through the Earth's atmosphere like a dying star, leaving a trail of fire and smoke against the pre-dawn sky. Celera gripped the edges of her seat. Her body braced against the violent shudders of the failing craft. Warning lights flickered in erratic bursts as the onboard systems screamed in languages she no longer had the energy to decipher. Her thoughts were a tangle of grief, exhaustion, and faint hope. This world, a blue and green anomaly in the darkness of space, was her last chance. The impact came with a deafening roar, a cloud of dirt and debris erupting into the air as the ship plowed into a forested area. The Revani diplomat dragged herself from the wreckage, her silvery skin marred by burns and cuts, her psychic presence a faint echo of what it once was. She stumbled through the trees, clutching her side, her breath shallow and labored. As dawn broke, she emerged from the forest edge into a small human settlement. The scene was almost serene. Rows of modest houses, the faint sound of wind chimes, and the distant hum of early morning activity. But her sudden appearance shattered the peace. The first human to see her screamed, dropping their basket of groceries. Others followed suit, their reactions ranging from horrified gasps to panic calls for help. Solara's alien form, slender and tall, with elongated limbs and eyes that glowed faintly violet, was unlike anything they'd encountered. She tried to speak, her voice cracking in a language not her own, but the words dissolved into coughing. Her legs gave way, and she collapsed to the ground. Dr. Alex Carter was jolted awake by the urgent buzz of his communicator. Bleary-eyed, he fumbled to answer, his mind still half asleep. "Dr. Carter, we need you at the East Quadrant," a voice crackled. "An alien survivor, we think, crash-landed. She's hurt." He was out of bed and pulling on his jacket before the call ended. His work at the refugee center had exposed him to numerous alien species displaced by wars and disasters. But a crash survivor? That was new. When Alex arrived, the scene was chaos. A small crowd had gathered around the unconscious figure, murmurs of fear and curiosity rippling through the air. Alex pushed through, his medical bag in hand, and froze when he saw her. She was unlike any alien he'd encountered. Her injuries were severe. Burns across her arms, a deep gash along her side. But what struck him most was her expression. Even in unconsciousness, her face was etched with despair. "Everyone back," he snapped, kneeling beside her. He ran a quick scan with his handheld device, noting her weak but stable vital signs. "We need to get her to the center, now." Celera awoke to the sterile hum of medical equipment. Her eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the unfamiliar surroundings. A human sat nearby, his gaze cautious but not unkind. "You're safe?" Alex said, his voice steady. "I'm Dr. Carter. You crash-landed. Do you understand me?" She nodded weakly, her voice barely a whisper. Translator functional. Alex leaned forward. "Good. Can you tell me your name? What happened?" "Celera," she croaked. "Reveni diplomat, last of my kind." Her words were fragmented, each one an effort. The plague, it took everything. "My people, gone." Alex frowned, his mind racing. He'd heard of the Revani, a reclusive race known for their psychic abilities and deep emotional bonds. But extinction? He couldn't fathom the weight of her words. "I need a bond," Celera continued, her voice trembling. "Humans, you are compatible. For survival." Alex stiffened, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "A bond? What does that mean?" Solara's violet eyes locked onto his, desperation radiating from her. "Psychic bond. To ensure my race continues. Without it, I will die, and the Revani will be lost forever." The room fell into a tense silence. Alex's discomfort was palpable. The idea of a psychic bond with an alien, especially one he'd just met, was unnerving. I don't know if I can do that," he admitted, taking a step back. "You must," Celera said, her voice rising despite her weakness. "I did not come to your world to beg, but I have no choice. Without the bond, I cannot, I cannot reproduce. My people's legacy ends with me. Alex ran a hand through his hair, struggling to process her words. He wanted to help. He always did. But this, it felt invasive, alien in every sense of the word. Seeing his hesitation, Solara's expression crumpled. Please, she whispered. You do not understand the void, the silence. I cannot bear it. As she spoke, a wave of emotion surged through Alex's mind, not his own but hers. Pain, loss, and an overwhelming loneliness that made his chest tighten. He staggered, clutching the edge of the bed. What are you doing?" he demanded. "Showing you," Celera said, her voice breaking. "My people, our cities, our families, all gone. I carry their memories, their hopes, their pain. I cannot let it end like this." Images flooded Alex's mind. Vibrant cities filled with shimmering light. Families linked by bonds of love and understanding, all crumbling under the weight of an unseen plague. He saw Celera standing alone amidst the ruins, screaming into the emptiness. When the vision ended, Alex found himself trembling. He looked at Celera, who lay exhausted, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'll think about it," he said quietly. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. For the first time since her arrival, Celera allowed herself a flicker of hope. Alex sat in his office, staring at the dim glow of his desk lamp. The day's events replayed in his mind on an endless loop. Solara's plea echoed in his ears, and the images she had shown him, her people's destruction, her unbearable loneliness, lingered in his thoughts like phantom pain. He wasn't sure what compelled him to go back to her room that night. Perhaps it was curiosity, or perhaps it was guilt. Celera lay motionless on the bed, her silvery skin dull under the sterile lighting. She looked fragile, so unlike the commanding presence she projected earlier. When her eyes fluttered open and met his, Alex felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. "I'll do it," he said softly, the word surprising even himself. "I'll bond with you, but only because I want to help. This isn't easy for me." Solara's gaze sharpened, a flicker of hope breaking through the exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered. "I will guide you. It will not hurt." The bonding process began the next morning. Alex had expected machines, wires, something physical to tether their two vastly different species together. Instead, Celera instructed him to sit across from her, their hands barely touching. "Close your eyes," she said, her voice steady but gentle. "Let me in." Alex hesitated, then complied. A sudden warmth radiated from Solara's fingertips, and a flood of sensations overwhelmed him. He gasped as his mind became a canvas painted with her emotions. Grief so profound it felt like drowning, guilt sharp enough to cut, and hope fragile as glass. He saw the plague as she had seen it. He felt the psychic bonds of her people shatter one by one, leaving an emptiness that clawed at his very soul. He understood, in a way words could never convey, the depth of her loss. Celera, in turn, experienced Alex's mind, a kaleidoscope of human resilience and individuality, emotions shielded behind carefully constructed barriers. Her touch was tentative, like a diver testing deep waters. She sensed his discomfort, his unease with such raw intimacy, and tried to pull back. "It's the lot," Alex muttered, his voice strained. "I know," Celera replied, her own voice tinged with vulnerability. "But the bond is forming. You are strong, Alex Carter. Stronger than I expected." The connection left them both drained, but it also planted the first seed of understanding. Over the following days, Alex and Celera began working together in earnest. The bond allowed them to share thoughts and ideas with astonishing clarity, though it was not without challenges. Celera explained the intricacies of Ravani biology, how their psychic bonds functioned not only as emotional connections, but also as vital components of reproduction. Alex, in turn, introduced her to human scientific methods, from genetic mapping to the intricacies of disease control. Their interactions were a blend of fascination and frustration. Celera marveled at humanity's analytical approach, but struggled with what she perceived as emotional detachment. Alex, on the other hand, was awed by the Ravani's psychic depth, but found their lack of personal boundaries overwhelming. "You humans compartmentalize everything," Celera remarked one evening, frustration evident in her tone. "Emotions, thoughts, even relationships. It is unnatural." "It's how we cope," Alex replied, adjusting the settings on a diagnostic machine. "You can't just walk into someone's mind whenever you feel like it. We value privacy. Privacy is a concept born of distrust," Celera countered. "The Ravani shared everything, our joys, our fears. It made us stronger." "Maybe," Alex said, glancing at her. "But it also made you vulnerable, didn't it? When the bonds broke, it nearly destroyed you." Celera fell silent, her gaze dropping. "You are not wrong," she admitted, "but it is lonely to live without that connection." Alex softened. "Lonely isn't the same as alone. You're not alone anymore." Their bond deepened in ways neither of them had anticipated. Alex began to see flashes of Solara's past, a vibrant world filled with crystalline cities, where every being was connected in a web of shared consciousness. He felt her love for her mate, a Ravani whose memory lingered in her mind like a haunting melody, and her guilt for surviving when so many others had not. Celera, in turn, glimpsed fragments of Alex's life. A childhood spent dreaming of the stars, the pain of losing his parents to illness, and the quiet pride he took in his work. She saw the walls he had built around himself, walls that even he didn't fully understand. Their cultural differences led to moments of humor as well as conflict. Celera was baffled by human food, particularly Alex's habit of eating while working. "Your species consumes sustenance with such disregard," she observed, wrinkling her nose as Alex munched on a granola bar over a stack of notes. "And your species doesn't eat at all." Alex shot back, amused. "We do, but it is a shared ritual," Celera explained. "A bonding experience." "Well," Alex said with a grin, "you're welcome to share this granola bar, but I don't think it's going to be very spiritual." For the first time since they'd met, Celera laughed, a sound that was more musical hum than voice. The turning point came during a late-night session in the lab. They were analyzing samples of Ravani DNA when Celera faltered, clutching the edge of the table. Alex rushed to her side, the bond immediately transmitting her pain and exhaustion. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said, guiding her to a chair. "I have no choice," she replied, her voice trembling. "Time is not on our side." Alex knelt in front of her, their eyes meeting. "You don't have to do this alone anymore," he said firmly. "We're in this together." The bond pulsed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the connection they now shared. What had begun as a reluctant agreement had grown into something far more profound. For the first time in years, Celera allowed herself to believe in hope, not just for her people, but for herself. And Alex, though he couldn't yet admit it, began to see Celera not as a burden or a responsibility, but as someone who had become integral to his life. Together, they were no longer just a human and an alien. They were something new, a partnership forged in desperation, strengthened by understanding and bound by a shared purpose. The news of Solara's survival spread like wildfire. Within days of her crash landing, whispers turned into headlines, and headlines turned into debates across Earth and beyond. The last Ravani diplomat, an alien whose survival depended on humanity, was a story too big to ignore. At first, the attention was manageable. Celera remained in the refugee center under Alex's care, their work progressing steadily. But as intergalactic media began broadcasting her plight, the floodgates opened. Earth's politicians convened emergency meetings, split between those advocating to help Celera and those fearing the consequences. "We cannot allow Earth to become embroiled in alien affairs," one senator argued. "If the Galactic Council learns we're enabling Ravani reproduction, we risk violating interstellar treaties." Others saw opportunity. This is our chance to secure humanity's influence in galactic politics, countered a rival representative. The Ravani were a revered species. Their survival could make us invaluable allies. Amid the chaos, the Galactic Council dispatched a delegation to Earth. Their message was clear. Celera should be taken into custody for study, ensuring the Ravani's genetic secrets were preserved for scientific purposes. Celera sat in Alex's lab, her expression tense as she watched the news reports. Politicians and commentators debated her existence like she was a mere abstraction, not a living being. "They speak of me as if I am property," she said, her voice low. Alex glanced up from his microscope. That's what bureaucrats do. Reduce people to problems they can solve or control. Don't let it get to you. But Alex wasn't immune to the pressure. The refugee center's director had already warned him about the risks of harboring Celera. His colleagues avoided him. Whispers of his involvement with the alien circulating through the facility. "We're running out of time," Alex said, his voice grim. "The Council isn't going to wait forever, and the Earth government is too divided to protect you. If we don't make progress soon—" "I know," Celera interrupted, her tone softening. She reached out, her hand brushing his. "But you've already given so much. More than I deserve." Alex met her gaze, the psychic bond between them pulsing faintly. "This isn't about what you deserve. It's about what's right." The pressure reached a breaking point when Galactic Council representatives arrived at the refugee center. Celera was in her room, meditating to conserve her waning energy, when Alex was summoned to a meeting with the delegation. A tall, reptilian envoy named Krythel stood at the head of the group, his expression cold. "Dr. Carter, your actions are interfering in matters far beyond Earth's jurisdiction. The Ravani were a galactic treasure, and their preservation is too important to be left in the hands of a single human scientist." Alex folded his arms, his voice steady but defiant. "Preservation? You mean exploitation. You don't want to save Celera. You want to use her." Krythel's slitted eyes narrowed. "Careful, Doctor. Your defiance could have consequences for your entire species." Alex refused to back down. "If you think I'm going to hand her over to be dissected or imprisoned, you've underestimated humanity." The meeting ended in a stalemate, but Alex knew the Council wouldn't leave without Celera. That night, Celera found Alex in the lab, slumped over his workstation. He hadn't slept in days, his eyes bloodshot from staring at genetic sequences and data streams. "You should rest," she said gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "So should you," Alex replied, his voice weary but determined. "We're so close, Celera. If we can isolate the genetic markers that make humans compatible with Ravani physiology, we might be able to synthesize a cure." Celera hesitated, her own exhaustion evident. The psychic energy she channeled to help Alex navigate Ravani biology had taken a toll on her body. Each session left her weaker, her once vivid glow now dim. "I will endure," she said quietly. "If it means saving my people, I will give everything I have." Alex looked at her, his chest tightening. "Not at the cost of your life. I'm not losing you too." The bond between them flared with emotion, her gratitude, his protectiveness, their shared determination. As the days passed, Alex's sacrifices mounted. The refugee center dismissed him, citing his refusal to cooperate with the Galactic Council. His colleagues cut ties, and his reputation as a biologist was in shambles. Yet Alex pressed on, transforming his small apartment into a makeshift lab. Celera remained by his side, guiding him through the Ravani's intricate genetic history. The process was grueling, requiring her to project ancient memories and biological data into Alex's mind. Each projection left her visibly drained, but she never complained. One evening, after hours of work, Celera collapsed. Alex caught her before she hit the floor, the psychic bond screaming with her pain. He carried her to the couch, panic tightening his chest. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said, his voice breaking. "I have no choice," she murmured, her eyes barely open. "If this fails—" I have failed my people. Alex knelt beside her, his hand gripping hers. You haven't failed, and you're not alone in this. We'll finish what we started, together. Solara's lips curved into a faint smile. You are remarkable, Alex Carter. The universe is cruel for making me find you so late. Emotions surged through their bond, a mix of admiration, affection, and something deeper neither dared to name. The sacrifices they made were not without results. Late one night, Alex stared at the data flashing on his screen, his exhaustion melting into triumph. I think I've got it, he whispered, then louder, Celera. I think I've got it. Celera, still weak but determined, joined him. Together, they reviewed the findings, a synthetic solution that could counteract the genetic damage caused by the plague. Hope reignited between them, even as the world outside their small sanctuary grew darker. The Galactic Council and Earth's governments loomed like storm clouds on the horizon, but for the first time, Alex and Celera felt the weight of possibility. They were close, so close to giving the Ravani a future, no matter the cost. Months of relentless work finally bore fruit. The small lab Alex had cobbled together in his apartment hummed with activity as the final components of the genetic therapy clicked into place. Data streams confirmed what had seemed impossible. The therapy was viable. It could shield future Ravani offspring from the plague's devastation. Celera sat silently, her gaze fixed on the holographic projections of her people's genetic structure. Despite the exhaustion etched into her features, her expression was resolute. This is it, Alex, she said, her voice steady. We have what we need. Alex's relief was palpable, but his joy was tempered by the risks ahead. It's untested, Celera. If something goes wrong... She cut him off with a calm yet firm tone. If something goes wrong, I will accept the consequences. My life is a small price to pay for the survival of my people. The trial began the next day. Celera lay on the lab table, her breathing slow and even as Alex prepared the equipment. Their bond hummed faintly, a constant reassurance to them both. This might hurt, Alex warned, his voice tinged with guilt. I have endured worse, Celera replied, offering him a faint smile. And I will not face it alone. That is enough. The therapy involved a combination of gene-editing nanites and tailored biochemistry, a delicate, invasive procedure that would rewrite Solara's DNA to withstand the plague's ravages. But the process wasn't just physical. Her psychic abilities, woven deeply into her biology, were also at risk. As the treatment began, the bond between them flared with intensity. Alex felt everything Celera experienced: waves of pain, flashes of memory, and an unyielding determination that left him breathless. The connection between them deepened beyond anything they had known before. Alex saw Solara's life through her eyes, the vibrant cities of her homeworld, the laughter of children connected by shared thoughts, the warmth of her mate's embrace. He felt the shattering emptiness when the plague swept through, severing bonds and leaving her adrift in a silent void. Celera, in turn, felt Alex's pain, the fear of losing her, the weight of responsibility, and the guilt he carried for every moment he couldn't ease her suffering. But beneath it all was something she hadn't fully understood before, a love as fierce and unyielding as her own determination to survive. Through the bond, Alex whispered words he couldn't bring himself to say aloud. You're not just saving your people, Celera. You've saved me, too. The therapy was grueling, stretching into hours that felt like days. Alex refused to leave her side, his hands steady even as the toll on Celera became evident. Her silvery skin dulled, and her psychic aura, once so vibrant, began to fade. When the procedure finally ended, the lab was silent except for Solara's ragged breathing. Alex leaned heavily against the table, his own exhaustion a pale shadow of what she had endured. Did it work? Solara's voice was barely above a whisper. Alex checked the monitors, his heart pounding. The data was clear. The therapy had succeeded. Solara's genetic structure had stabilized, and the modifications would allow her to conceive offspring resistant to the plague. It worked, Alex said, his voice breaking with emotion. You did it, Solara. The cost, however, was not insignificant. Solara's psychic energy had been permanently diminished, leaving her unable to form new bonds. The vibrant connection she had once shared with her people would never fully return. But she was alive, and so was the hope of the Ravani's future. As Solara recovered, news of their success spread. Messages poured in from across the galaxy, expressions of gratitude, astonishment, and even apologies from those who had doubted her. The Galactic Council, faced with overwhelming public support for Solara, withdrew their demands for custody. In the final moments of the story, Alex and Solara stood on the balcony of the refugee center, overlooking the sprawling city. The sky was alive with alien ships and human aircraft, a testament to the unity that had been sparked by their efforts. You've given your people a future, Alex said, breaking the silence. We have, Solara corrected, her gaze softening as she looked at him. I could not have done this without you, Alex Carter. You are extraordinary. Alex smiled faintly, his usual skepticism melting under her sincerity. I'm just a guy with a stubborn streak. Solara reached out, her hand brushing his. Though her psychic aura was diminished, their bond remained, a faint but steady thread between two souls who had faced the impossible together. Whatever happens next, Solara said, I will carry you with me. Always. Alex nodded, emotion tightening his throat. And I'll always be here if you need me. As they stood together, the galaxy began to heal, one species, one bond at a time. Solara's survival was more than a victory for the Ravani. It was a testament to the strength of unity, resilience, and the connections that could form even in the face of overwhelming odds. For Alex and Solara, the journey had been one of sacrifice and transformation, and though their paths might diverge, their bond would remain, a quiet reminder that hope could arise from the most unexpected places.